everyone. This is the Lament configuration. This is our third show. I am Greg Knox. I'm here with Ria Fend.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ria. How's it going?
Good, thank you. I'm still recovering from our last instalment of Cannibal movies, and I believe we're about to go for round two.
Indeed we are. So on our last show, we started discussing Video Nasties. So that's the 72 movies that were banned under the Video Recordings Act 1984. Our last show, we discussed 3 cannibal movies. We have 3 more lovely cannibal movies to discuss on this show. And before we continue, Ria has a little disclaimer that she wants to read, just in case there was anyone in there who wasn't quite sure what they were getting into on today's show.
Warning, the following broadcast may contain spoilers, extreme language, violence, and topics considered graphic or adult, not for those of a sensitive disposition.
Indeed, extreme language could be a warning for every show that we do, to be honest. But yeah.
Mainly you.
Yes, it is mainly me. It's the reason I don't work for Crone Radio anymore, let's put it that way. Let's get started. So on our last show we discussed Cannibal Holocaust, which is the best cannibal film, would you say?
Yeah, the most renowned. I would say it's a classic. It's a good old classic.
Good old classic. Okay, I would say it's probably by far the best in terms of actual filmmaking. But we have probably the second most infamous cannibal film, or possibly the most infamous, depending on your point of view. This might be a debate that we have on the show today from the sounds of things, which is Cannibal Ferox, which is directed by Umberto Lenzi. This is also had the awesome title of Make Them Die Slowly, which is a great name. And yep. Alternatively, Woman from Deep River, which ties into one of the films that we're going to discuss later on, because a film called Man from Deep River, which we're also going to discuss on the show, that was also directed by Umberto Lenzi. So I think maybe originally this was intended as a sort of, not a direct sequel, but a spiritual sequel to that movie. Umberto Lenzi is a fairly well-known, if you know your Italian exploitation films, director of all kinds of different genres, so like gialli, cannibal movies, and polizioteschi movies and zombie movies. Polizioteschi movies, I think, are his best. That's the genre that he kind of excels in most. So he's a director of films such as Almost Human, which is a really good film, Eaten Alive, which is another cannibal movie, Nightmare City, which is a zombie movie, which I quite highly recommend. It's quite enjoyable. And various gialli. He directed about 7 or 8 gialli in all, including Spasmo, which is a great title. So in this film, we have... Sorry?
I've got the synopsis. It's 1981, this film. So the last 3 that we talked about were 1980. And the synopsis is 3 friends out to disprove cannibalism meet 2 men on the run who tortured and enslaved a cannibal tribe to find emeralds. And now the tribe is out for revenge. So I guess that's pretty standard cannibal story sort of setting.
Yeah, so essentially in the last show, when I mentioned that like the plot of most cannibal films is white people go to the jungle, they piss off the natives, they get eaten. That is essentially the plot of this. Pretty much in those 3 sentences. Now, this came a year after Cannibal Holocaust, and a lot of people say that this is just a rip-off of Cannibal Holocaust. I mean, it's not... I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, what do you think?
No, not a rip-off. Obviously think that they've duly noted the points. I read somewhere that this is considered a popcorn cannibal film, which I assume means that it ticks all of the boxes. And if you like your gore, then you're definitely going to like watching this. I was quite excited to watch this one because I'd seen Cannibal Holocaust a couple of times, but never seen this one. And,
okay. It's very interesting that you say you're excited to watch it. That's not really the reaction that I think the DPP were looking for. Like saying, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this film of, mutilation and sort of, animal slaughter and things like that. But okay.
How we discussed like the whole theory of video nasties, and when you were younger and you heard what that was, and it kind of made you want to watch it more because of the, controversial content. And
exactly.
Well, this is one of those that I knew that it was considered a little bit more serious in terms of similar to Cannibal Holocaust. So I was expecting the content to be surprising and shocking. And that, that's exciting to me because it's very rare, especially with horror these days, that you see something that you haven't seen before. So for me, there's like that kind of dangerous territory of it. It could be really unpleasant, or there could be something that I've never seen in horror before. So that's why I was excited about it.
Well, if you want unpleasant, you've come to the right place. Let's put it that way.
I wouldn't say it was ripping it off. I think it's more of a continuation. Like they knew what formula worked, but they tried to do their own take on things. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a direct rip-off. It has certain similarities. So, for example, the very, very start of the film is set in New York, which is is the same as Cannibal Holocaust. Although setting films in New York was also a practice that Lucio Fulci used to use a lot. For example, in Zombie Flesh Eaters, New York Ripper, films like that. New York's very popular in Italian exploitation for some reason. It also uses Robert Kerman. He appears in this film as a police detective who is trying to track down Mike, who is played by Giovanni Lombardo Radice, him again. Again using his John Morgan pseudonym, who is not the main character, but he's kind of the character that makes everything happen in the film. He's also by far the most interesting character in the film. The main character, who's Gloria, is played by Lorraine Desselle, who also appears in House on the Edge of the Park. So she appears in a few kind of Italian exploitation films. She's the main character, and she's also with her brother and her friend Pat. They're not really very interesting characters. It's only the Mike character that kind of drives the film on.
Yeah. I thought I enjoyed this film actually. Because it didn't disappoint me, and I do think that you need a strong stomach to watch this. So I think if you like Cannibal Holocaust, you will like this. And there was some contrasting bits of like that kind of cheap element that we've discussed before that I quite like in horror, that made it kind of funny in places, but mostly it's a serious one. And I think the storyline was pretty great with the whole research and the doctorate thing with her going out there. I thought that was quite believable and quite a good structure. What did you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole kind of... I think that was the whole... I'm trying to think the right word to use here, but you know how in Cannibal Holocaust, the theme of the film is, well, who are the real cannibals? So essentially, Is it the natives or is it the documentary crew? In this, you've got basically... Does cannibalism actually exist, or is it something that white people have just created because they're a bunch of racists, essentially?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was me, it's like, do you necessarily have to go to the jungle to prove that? I mean, I can kind of see the logic in that, but I just think, like, going there without a guide, which is another thing in Cannibal Holocaust that at least kind of made sense, is like when the professor goes to the jungle, at least he has two guides to kind of show him like where to go, and he kind of knows how to interact with the natives. They kind of just look like a bunch of fucking morons, really. They're just going to the jungle. They don't really know where they're going. Their car breaks down, which always happens. They brought like J&B with them to the Amazon, which is like, why are you bringing whiskey all the way into the jungle? That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
In hindsight, though, they would need that under the conditions. Like,
well,
you gotta go out. You may as well get drunk as well,
Well, very true. I suppose you got to do something in those long hours in the jungle. Another thing I found interesting about the film is obviously you got the Green Inferno, which we talked about on our very first show here on the Lament configuration. I would say this film is actually closer to that film than Cannibal Holocaust, which is actually its direct influence. I mean, what would you say about that?
I guess so. I think this is more geared towards the female perspective of she goes in there, which is unusual. So I think that was different. I don't know. How would you say it was similar to Green Inferno? Really? Do you mean it's because of the way the tribesmen are portrayed, that they're just kind of they don't do a lot. They just sort of stand around looking,
looking scary. Yeah. I would say
don't do a lot. So
yeah.
Is it like the kind of... I've seen this aesthetic in many sort of tribal cannibal films before. This kind of white chalk people with like long black hair sort of look. They kind of go for that as if that's like a proven sort of cannibal look. I don't know.
Well, or you could do what they did in Cannibal Terror and just take a bunch of like white people and just put like silly face paint on them. There's that as well.
Yeah, how would you compare it to Green Inferno? Because that's interesting, an interesting concept.
Well, in Cannibal Holocaust, like the documentary crew, they don't really get captured or anything like that. They're there to make the documentary. They do all these horrible films, and then they basically go too far and they get killed. Basically, the cannibals don't fuck around. Whereas in this, they, the white people, they go there, they sort of stay there a little bit. Mike rapes the cannibal woman, and then they basically get put in a cage. Well, not in a cage. They get, well, actually no, they do get put in a cage, don't they? You get put in a cage originally, the one by the river, and then they have all like the horrible things done to them, and they kill them basically one at a time. But it's very protracted.
In which case, I agree on that premise. Like the bit where they were put in the cage, that does remind me of that, and the style of the tribesmen, it does remind me of that film. So I would say that Green Inferno were probably heavily influenced by Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox, but wanted to make a modern film a bit like that. And then they added in that comedy. I don't know if that was intentional, that comedy. I know we discussed it last time, but it does come across as it's intentional comedy.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Although we do have the Mike character who does seem to bring coke with him into the jungle, which is very interesting because obviously he was able to get that through customs in 1981. I don't think you'd be able to do that now.
Yeah, not now, but probably then, I would say. They got away with a lot more then. Some takeaway quotes, because I always like to write down a good quote when I'm watching something like this. At one point, one of them says, "Just stay put, shit face," which I thought was hilarious and wrote that. And then the key quote that is everywhere, literally anybody who's ever reviewed this movie, and then they ate his genitals. So yeah, that's by Mike when he's giving his story about how the cannibals brutally tortured another person.
Like his guide.
Yeah. So that's like the key quote of the movie that everybody remembers upon watching this.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I took from the movie is Mike seems to have a preoccupation with calling everyone a twat.
Yeah, and I've even got this noted that women are referred to as twats on at least 2 occasions, so there's a lot of misogyny in this movie.
Yeah, it's incredibly misogynistic. Like, so I think he uses that word at least 5 times. Quite interesting because that's a very British word. It's not really sort of word that Italian people would probably use. So I don't know. It's very, very curious choice of insult that they've used there.
Yeah, there's a nice beheading in this movie. Genital mutilation and the infamous shot of the woman being supported up above the ground by only hooks through her breast, which I found really shocking but very creative.
Whoa.
I've never. This film did stand out for those reasons, and the animal cruelty was fairly unbearable. But again, it does add something to the movie in this case because, with us looking back on that era and what they got away with, it is just fascinating and shocking, like how much they put in there. So yeah, although it's awful, it is like fascinating to watch, knowing that people did actually get away with doing that back then. Pair with that some nice cheesy 80s music, and you've got yourself a popcorn cannibal movie.
Yeah, I guess if there was anything that was going to be called a popcorn cannibal movie, it is this, because if you like your gore, this is definitely going to fill you. It's going to satisfy you in that regard, because yeah, as you said, you've got 3 very, very, very gory scenes where, as you said, you've got Pat getting hung up by her breasts, with hooks through them, which I don't think I've seen in any other movie sort of since. So I'm quite interested in how they did that, because it looked fairly realistic.
It does look pretty realistic, especially when they're putting the hook in. It's just like, oh wow, you went there, okay.
And there's the mainstay of the cannibal film, the man getting his penis chopped off. That always lovely standby.
Yeah, and then and I've noticed this in quite a few cannibal movies. There's the old sort of scalping bit where somebody ends up getting scalped, and then the brains are like visible from the top. Whether that happens sometimes with animals, but in this I'm pretty sure it was a guy, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's the Mike character. So at the end he has they've got the table with the hole in the middle, and they make him stick his head through it, and Yeah, they chop it off and devour his brains.
Yeah, so it's pretty action packed, and this it held my attention all the way through. And although I did find some parts of it funny, like I explained to you, it's not too much that it detracted away from all of that was going on.
No, I wouldn't
Um,
say this is the thing. Like, obviously, I don't think it's a good film per se. I do think it's infamous. I think it's infamous for good reason. I think the bits that are infamous do sort of stand out more so than other films. I think the film has a nice pace to it. I don't think there are any bits of it that are really boring or anything like that. So you've kind of got everything. There are no slow parts, let's put it that way. With a film like this, you kind of don't want to wait around too long for things to happen. So I think you've got at least things happening every 5 minutes. I could do without a couple of the animal deaths. I think the scene with the snake and the furry animal, I think it was a muskrat maybe or something like that, that I could have done without, because it went on for about 2 minutes and it was very slow and agonising, and you can hear the animal screeching, and like
yeah,
really
it's
could have lived
pretty.
without that, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and because it's like animal cruelty, but animals being cruel to other animals, which is just even more
Yeah,
bizarre.
because what you've got to, I don't know, the issue with that, fair enough, like for example in Cannibal Holocaust you've got the character who shoots a pig. That's obviously a man killing an animal, and I think the excuse that Deodata used at the time is that, well, the cannibals were going to eat the animals anyway, so it's not as if we took an animal that was just going about its daily life and just kind of was like, hi, fuck you, we're going to kill you now. It's,
Yeah,
are they basically taking animals and just kind of putting them in a situation where one of them is going to eat the other one in an artificial way, which is quite interesting, almost in like tying into Cannibal Holocaust again, is that kind of, it's not like a nature documentary, for example, where you'll be waiting around and waiting around and waiting around and you see this stuff happen in the wild all the time and that's just
yeah,
nature's way. Or is it that they've kind of taken these two animals and put them in that scenario and stuck a camera in front of it artificially?
yeah. It's disturbing and drawn out, and feels so unnecessary that it's in this kind of forced environment that they put them together, and it's like fight to the death, like the old-fashioned cockfights.
Which is
Which
quite
happen.
interesting because we literally have a cockfight in another film we're going to discuss later on.
We do, and that's why it sort of sprung to mind, because it's like another element of this film where they've been like, right, okay, let's get some sort of artificial rape going on, a lot of gore, but like let's also let two animals fight it out to the death, and you don't know which one's going to win. And it's just crazy. It's like so forced, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's almost like when if a man in the movie is killing an animal and you think, oh, it's destructive like the nature of mankind. But then when it's like two animals forced into that situation, it's almost like it's indirect, like mankind being destructive,
Yeah.
but like letting them do what they're gonna do and letting it take its toll. But it's like force, so it just feels just wrong on another level. I think it really does kind of become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, isn't
No,
it? I
no, I
don't
know
know.
what you mean. It's just like, because, I don't know. I think in Cannibal Holocaust, in a way, the animal cruelty, although, as I said, it's wrong, it kind of added to the film. In this, they didn't necessarily need so much. Like, that scene in particular, I could have lived without. I think all the others didn't really bother me so much. Like, where the turtle gets killed in this one, it's pretty quick. It's less protracted than the one in Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, still
Oh no,
bad,
yeah,
but
don't
not
get me
as.
wrong. Yeah, it's not great, but in I don't know. I think in terms of wrong, it's less wrong than sort of the other one. The only thing that I said I say enjoy is probably the wrong word. I kind of appreciate this for what it is. I still kind of felt a bit scummy afterwards, just because I don't really get that feeling with Cannibal Holocaust. This didn't really affect me at all. I was in no way disturbed by this film. It's the same way as when I saw a Serbian film for the first time. Yeah, I respect there's all these disturbing things going on in it, but it's like, okay, I don't feel anything towards this whatsoever.
Yeah, I found it interesting, but again, as a contrast to Cannibal Holocaust, it's not as
Deep.
like Yeah, it's not as deep, it's not as innovative, it's not as gory, and it's not as kind of harrowing as Cannibal Holocaust is. It's still like notable, it's still up there, but it's difficult to touch Cannibal
It's kind
Holocaust.
of like I don't know, I suppose it's like a Friday the 13th movie or like a slasher movie like that, in that you know what you're going to get. It's not particularly very deep, it's not particularly very clever, and it's kind of got these boxes that it has to tick, but it ticks them really well.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, just not quite up there. So I can watch it, and like you say, I'm not as bothered as I was when I watched Cannibal Holocaust, but then it doesn't stand out as
Hmm.
much. But it's almost like that, you know.
I also didn't think the scenes in New York were really very necessary, because it's almost as if, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think. Those scenes were really unnecessary because ultimately, yeah, you could have literally taken them out of the film and it would have made no difference.
Yeah, I thought that, and I found that the ending really surprising, where she doesn't report back, and she's like so kind of like stunned by the whole thing, that she just basically doesn't
Yeah,
report on it.
she's clearly like very so deeply traumatized by what happened. We don't even really see her how she got back or anything. We just kind of cut from her sort of being discovered, and then all of a sudden she's just back in New York again. And then, you know, she's written her book and she said that cannibalism doesn't exist when we all know it does.
Yeah,
So
so that was pretty crazy because it kind of annoyed me that she did that, but I guess, that's the sort of twist, or like, clever part of the film, is that you want her to tell everybody what really happened. So I don't know, like, yeah, I agree with you that those parts could be cut out because they just feel so incredibly different, and it's not what you want to be watching.
no.
Like, that's what I'm watching it for. A couple of parts that I remember that I really liked was near the beginning, where they see that mangled body tied up against the
Oh
post.
yeah.
Do you
Yes, I
remember
do.
that? Yeah, like that stood out. I didn't know whether to laugh or like be shocked at that, but that mangled body, wow, that is really something. And also there's quite a lot of like gratuitous nudity and
Oh,
sex
come
in
on. You
this
know what you're
again,
getting
like as
into
with,
though with this, surely. Like, that Pat
yeah,
character is there just to get naked, basically. That's the only reason that she's there.
exactly. And another funny part was like there are some bugs that the natives are eating, and there's like exaggerated chomping sounds edited over the top,
Uh,
like there have been with other cannibal movies. I always find that absolutely hilarious. Yeah, it's just so funny. Like that and the mangled body on the post, like those parts stuck in my mind. They're quite amusing.
I thought the ending was interesting, and again, I want to tie this into the Green Inferno because again, I think this is where like they got the idea for the ending of the Green Inferno, because the idea is that the main character is essentially being a massive hypocrite and is sort of lying just to protect themselves, essentially, for some reason. I mean, in this case, it's because like she's gone there with this thesis that like cannibals don't exist, and to get her doctorate or her degree or whatever it is that she's actually doing, yeah, she has to in effect go, no, they don't exist. I went. It was great. I had a lovely time. Although they don't seem to question why like her brothers disappeared or why her friends disappeared, but whatever, you know.
Oh, yeah, I did find that kind of irritating, but yeah, I totally get where you're coming from with the Green Inferno comparison, because now, like, the more that I think about it, the more there are like lots of similarities
There
in
are lots
there.
of parallels. Whereas in the Green Inferno, the main character, the lie actually comes out of her mouth, and then she just goes back to her day to day life. Whereas in this, the character herself doesn't lie, but you can see that she's clearly very traumatized.
Yeah, yeah, you can see that she's not comfortable with what's being said.
Mm. So I think we can both agree from the sounds of things that we agree that this is a video nasty then.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting, well worth a watch. Not sure on your feelings about
I
this.
think it's, if you can stomach it, then yes, it is worth a watch in that it is entertaining. It's not. It's one of these films. It's not good, but it is entertaining. If that makes sense, and I don't mean in a so bad it's good way. It's not a bad film. It's kind of Lenzi has his own particular style. This is actually less similar to his style than the other film we're going to talk about on this show. But I think it's Cannibal Ferox. It's notorious. It was banned in like 8 million countries for a reason. It's kind of one of these that, like, you kind of, if you are a gore hound, and you kind of owe it to yourself to watch this at least once. The animal cruelty, again, I can do without, but that kind of goes without saying. But yeah, it's worth a watch.
Yeah, agreed.
And if you want to watch it on DVD, again, you can buy this if you are in the UK. It's from S. Golden Son, the company put it out. Now, clearly, because of the animal cruelty and the various scenes that happen, as you can imagine, it is cut. So if you want to see it in its full glory, shall we say, you may not want to watch that version. You may want to seek out alternatives where you can see it fully uncut. So next, keeping with the theme, this also has cannibal in the title. It's another Italian cannibal movie. This is Mountain of the Cannibal God, or alternatively, Prisoner of the Cannibal God, or indeed, Slave of the Cannibal God. Pretty, yeah. As you can see, pretty similar titles there. So this is directed by Sergio Martino, who is one of my favourite Italian giallo directors, definitely. His first 5 movies were all gialli, and they're all great films. So these are The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, All the Colours of the Dark, Your Voice Is a Lot Room, and Only I Have the Key, and Torso. They're films that I recommend very highly. He's a very stylish director. This stars Ursula Andress, so the very first Bond girl from Dr. No, and Stacey Keach, who's actually quite a big actor to appear in such a film like this. At this point in his career, I think he'd been in Fat City, which is a great film directed by John Huston, and I suppose his most famous role is probably in American History X, if you've seen that.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So, Mountain of the Cannibal God is 1978 film, and the synopsis: a girl and her brother fly to New Guinea to look for a lost expedition led by her husband, which has vanished in the great jungle. I'm not sure if that synopsis makes sense, actually, now I'm reading it, but thanks, IMDb.
Well, if it's on IMDb, it must be right, surely. Although, anyone could put up a synopsis there and it might not make sense. But yeah, it's essentially, it's a woman player, so Susan Stevenson, played by Ursula Andress, and her brother are trying to look for her husband, and her guide is Professor Edward Foster, played by Stacey Keach. And on the way, they meet various cannibals, and they're trying to find this specific cannibal tribe where they believe the husband was going. And it turns out that essentially the husband was trying to look for uranium and trying to make a lot of money. Okay.
Yeah. Overall, this is quite a harsh one. What stood out for me was the masks in this film.
Yeah, there's a lot of cannibals wearing sort of very cool looking masks, I thought. So like you can tell they're the really bad cannibals because they've got masks on. I thought that was slightly different. I think that added a lot to those particular cannibals. It's a shame that kind of later on, when we actually do end up in the tribe itself, that they're not all wearing those kind of masks.
Yeah, it's this kind of, it's almost like they've made it out of wax or something, or I don't know, like out of something natural. Do you know what I mean? It looks like if you poured a load of wax onto a face and you let it set, and it's all kind of like smooth, but almost like representing the human face, but in a really kind of weird way.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, it's supposed to be scary, essentially, and it looks natural as well. It doesn't look like a person just created it artificially. It looks like an actual cannibal or a native would have done it themselves. Which
for me made it so much more frightening. I did think they looked genuinely scary.
Yeah.
So I was impressed with that.
It's interesting because this is another film where you've got the good cannibals and the bad cannibals. So you've got the good cannibals sort of halfway through the film where they're sort of on their way, and Stacey Keach, I think is it a white guy who's kind of looking after sort of the good cannibals. It's almost like a retreat almost, and they're there, but then you've got the bad cannibals in the masks, and they're the ones that eat people and the others don't,
I can't remember if you said if you've watched this one or not, but my standout film of last year, Bone Tomahawk, which very much features bad cannibals. Those ones in the mask kind of slightly reminded me of that, but in Bone Tomahawk, it's so much more brutal. But it's similar, like, just kind of brutal, like unfeeling, very quick sort of approach where they just kind of come out of nowhere and they look very threatening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have seen Bone Tomahawk, and yeah, I would definitely agree with that assessment. I didn't enjoy this movie so much compared to, say, others that we've discussed so far. The reason for that is a lot of the film just feels like it's going through the motions. Stacy Keach is a good actor, but in this film, he just feels like he's just on autopilot, and he clearly doesn't give a fuck. He just feels like he's just there. Maybe he was just doing this for the money. Maybe he wanted a holiday. I don't know, but he just doesn't seem like he's that fussed. Ursa Andress is not a good actress. Clearly, I mean, she was. I don't think it's particularly unfair to say she wasn't hired really for her acting ability, although given that Dr. No is like 1960, 1961, maybe 62, and this is 15 years later, she was obviously maybe a little bit desperate maybe for work at this point. I don't know, maybe that's why she took the job. The only guy who actually gives what I think is a good performance in this is the guy who plays Manolo, who's Claudio Casanelli, who is actually quite good. He's also in a film called What Have They Done to Your Daughters, which is another Giallo that I've seen. I've seen quite a few Gialli, as you can probably guess from listening to this show, and yeah, he's very good in that, and he actually gives probably the best performance in the film, but he only turns up halfway through, and it's a bit of a slog until the last sort of 20 minutes. What's your opinion?
Oh, I found this so difficult to watch, probably the most difficult to watch, because usually if I'm watching something that has like very heavy content like this, I might try to sort of mentally break it up by finding some lighter areas of the film or some kind of relief. But the actual content of this movie, even though, as we've discussed these previous cannibal movies, they all touch upon very similar devices or themes that they've used to be shocking, and it's quite sort of there's usually a formula where we're ticking those boxes. This one, they do push it that bit further. So I found this one really difficult to watch, if I'm honest, and that doesn't happen that often, not to this degree.
Which is weird, because this actually came before Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox.
Yeah, 1978. So this is quite an early one, and considering that those movies were made after that, they didn't push it as far as this. Maybe they knew it was too far and it wasn't a popular movie, but wow.
Is that the nihilistic tone of the film itself? Because there was one bit, I agree, there was one part which is the scene with the monkey being killed by the snake. Because that scene I really, really hated, because if we're comparing it to the other movies, at least what they tried to do with the animal cruelty scenes, at least they tried to kind of include them in the plot somewhere, where it's like the characters looking at them and being shocked, or they at least interacted with the people. With this, it's literally, there's a scene, there's a monkey, it gets killed by a snake, it takes about what seems like 20 years for it to finally die, and then it just cuts and it just starts again. You literally could take it out and it would not affect the movie whatsoever. I have no idea why they included it. It was absolutely sickening. I hated it.
So vile that I've made a little list in order. So you can expect to see an iguana eviscerated, which is like a much talked about scene of this movie. The monkey eaten by the snake after that, which is incredibly uncomfortable.
Yes.
Then I tried to break up this movie by adding a little bit of jovial lightness in there. So I've got here noted low angle tribal twerking.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny, that part. It's like, well, let's get some tribal folk with loincloths on and film them low angle so you can see their butt cheeks dancing around.
Is this in the last 20 minutes, or is this when they get to the nice cannibal tribe?
The nice cannibal tribe. And it's all like fire performance and happy dancing, and you're like, ooh, yeah, sexy twerking going on. Then I've got like, there's a beheading by one of the guys in the evil masks, which is, it looks fake, so it's not too bad. But then we've got this steadily increasing scale of rape, then animal rape, which
Well, I was
I was
going to
like,
say that was during now the last 20 minutes of this film. I actually did kind of enjoy it because I think what Martino was trying to do was he was trying to do like build up this sort of phantasmagorical kind of. I don't know. I get what he was trying to do, and it kind of worked in my opinion. So what you have is you have almost like this orgy going on where you've got Ursula Andress tied up wearing her kind of, I don't know, she's practically naked, isn't she? She's sort of tied up on this cross. And then you have all the cannibals basically just randomly having sex, and then you have the cannibal sort of masturbating, and there, yeah, you've got the cannibal fucking a pig.
yeah, is it like, how we talked about my much loved Rob Zombie movies? So is it like the one that we talked about last time, Lords of Salem, where they sort of paint this picture by having lots of different scenes in there, just kind of it cuts, cut to the next one, cut to the next one, cut to the next one. It's like almost like a collage
Yeah,
of
it's
different.
kind of similar to something you would get in like a Hodorowski movie or like a David Lynch movie, where you've got a certain kind of off-kilter music, and yeah, you have these collage of images where you've got all this really fucked up stuff going on over and over and over again, and it just cuts in a certain way that it's very frenzied, and I like that. I like stuff like that. That was my favourite bit of the movie, even though it did involve a man fucking a pig, but it was the only part of the movie that I felt is like, okay, yeah, this is the Sergio Martino that I know, and like this part actually I could actually feel something in it. It's just, other than before that, you've got all these people who basically turn out to be unlikable, trying to backstab each other, trying to get somewhere, lots of walking. It's like the Lord of the Rings, just lots of walking, trying to get somewhere, and then yeah, they actually do get somewhere, and yeah, at that point, yes, the movie did pick up.
I see what you mean, that it builds a lot of tension and frenzy, but for me it was too much. It's like rape, then animal rape, then female masturbation, then there's a penis cut off after the
Classic.
rape, and then at the end I've got that there's some brains spilled, and it's just all too much. I think for me the pig was the step too far, and then the penis being cut off.
You couldn't like forgive the pig fucking. The pig fucking was the bridge too far for you.
I couldn't forgive it, and it's like before that I wasn't too, like you say that you weren't too engaged, but I kind of was, because I quite enjoyed those, like, kind of the movement in the forest where the camera's like as if it's running through, kind of did remind me of that sort of found footage, like sort of DIY camera vibe. I thought it was quite interesting the way they were making it frantic by like running through the forest and stuff. Quite liked that, and I quite liked the bad cannibals, like with the scary masks. And for me, that was just too much. It had the desired effect that it felt very tense and quite, very scary. But yeah, for me, it was a step too far. I found it so uncomfortable.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess like it pushes it to that point where it's beyond the average film, so I can understand why that's like a good thing in horror.
I did think, going back to the ending though, I did think the cannibals were a bit dumb by the end, that she was somehow managed to escape, given the fact there was must have been about 50 cannibals just lying there around, and yet they were still able to get away. Like, that was, I don't know. Although, actually, one part I've just remembered, which there was a midget cannibal. Do you know?
I'm not sure I remember that.
You don't remember? My God. Okay, so one of the cannibals is like a midget. It's like Peter Dinklage-esque.
Explain the scenario. I might remember.
Okay, so this is after, I think, the man getting his dick cut off, and I kind of noticed him, just in the group of cannibals, just out of nowhere. It's like, is that a midget? And then, yeah, the midget does go over to Ursula Andress while she's tied up, and I think he's sort of really leery, and I don't know, I think something happens to him or something like that. But yeah, it's a very brief moment, but I did kind of find that quite entertaining, in the sense that, my God, it's a midget. You don't expect that, do you? The same way, yeah, I mean, obviously he's not, I'm guessing the cannibal wasn't really bumming a pig, but,
No, you can tell, obviously it's faked, but it's just I don't know, that the pig is like a huge
It's a
pig,
massive
and
pig, isn't it? We are not talking about some little piglet here. We're talking about a massive pig. It looks like the size of like a small cow or a sheep.
yeah, it's absolutely huge. So see, even though he's simulating it, he's kind of like
You can
at the
see
right.
what I kind of really liked in this film, because I keep going on about the pig fucking, honestly.
Yeah, it is like extreme and it's like shocking, and they've gone to some length. So in that sense, it is like impressive. But yeah, holy hell, I found this difficult to
No, see,
watch.
that's very interesting. I mean, I know. I'm kind of quite curious about this. So you're talking about literally the film from point A to point B, start to finish. You were really, really bothered by the film. It really had that much of an impact on you.
I was really bothered about the pig
Okay.
fucking. What can I say? Certain things I've seen a lot in horror, and I'm not,
But not pig fucking.
not too phased by, because it's. I wouldn't. It's like we've said, that you get used to seeing things, or you become slightly more immune to reacting to things. And we've watched so many horror films between us. It's easy to not find things shocking, especially if you think it's fake. But even though I knew that that wasn't real, for me, it was just a step too far. So yeah,
Okay.
found that uncomfortable. I did find it uncomfortable with the cannibal masturbating as well. I just thought, oh, why are you putting that in there? Like, do we really need to go
Yeah,
there?
it's just titillation, really, because the producer, the brother of Sergio Martino, Luciano Martino, he also makes like sort of Italian sort of sex films and things like that. So I think it's to kind of like I don't know, to deliberately make it like sleazy as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I knew it was going to go there. I could just predict it by the way the scene was going as well. So yeah, that it's sort of true to form with that one.
Okay, so given what we've said, you're pretty sure you're going to say this should be a video nasty.
Absolutely.
Yes. No, I agree. For the animal cruelty alone, if we ignore the other bits that I've probably mentioned enough, yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Should be a video nasty. Yeah.
There's no likeness or like value in this movie. It is all just like shock value and extreme. So I would say this is. Would you say this is more extreme than Cannibal Holocaust? Because I would.
Now that's a very interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that. I would say, look, to be honest, I wasn't affected by this, really. I get that you were. I get that you were shocked. I've seen Cannibal Holocaust 3 times, and by the end, it does affect me. Whereas this, I'm not gonna lie, I was bored. The scene where they're climbing up the waterfall was just painfully tedious to me, because I knew exactly what was going to happen, and there was no sense of tension that any of these characters were going to fall and die or anything like that. And yeah, the whole film kind of felt very similar to that until we kind of got to the end, and then it sort of picked up. Not just the bit with the pig, obviously, but like, that whole scene where you've got the frenzy and the orgy, and just, yeah, that part was cool. I could have really lived without the rest. So it's not a film I really want to ever see again, but that's because I just think it's just a very mediocre film.
Yeah, it is true. Quality-wise, it is very kind of mediocre.
Well, despite that, if you do, based on our review, if you're in any way curious by this, or you want to see, a man fucking a pig, then you can actually buy this. It's available from Black Horse Entertainment. Now, similar to other cannibal films, there are cuts in this film, presumably for the animal cruelty, maybe to other stuff as well that they've taken out. So again, if you want to see the uncut version, you may have to look elsewhere. So the last film we're going to talk about today, it's our 6th cannibal film. It's our final cannibal film proper. So you'll be pleased to know we won't need to talk about any more cannibal films for the rest of this series. But this is Man from Deep River, also known as Deep River Savages, and Sacrifice, with an exclamation mark at the end. Now this is also directed by Umberto Lenzi, and this stars Ivan Rasimov. He is a very good actor, in my opinion. He appears in various gialli, mostly directed by Sergio Martino, like the films that I mentioned earlier in the previous segment. And he's also appeared in a couple of Mario Bava films as well, like Planet of the Vampires and Shock. And also the female performance in this film is by Mimi Lai, who Again, appeared in other cannibal films like Jungle Holocaust and Eaten Alive, and also, quite curiously enough, a Lars von Trier film called The Element of Crime, which is one of von Trier's earliest films. So, not quite sure what she did in that film because I haven't seen that, but I won't judge.
So I've got the synopsis. It's 1972, this. So it's actually the earliest cannibal movie of all the ones we've watched. And the synopsis: after a photographer is captured by a native tribe and put through several trials, he must fight to protect the village and his new love interest, the chief's daughter, as we discussed, Mimi Lau.
So yeah, as you've already said, this is the very first cannibal film that was made in this cannibal boom of the 70s and the early 80s. Now, the interesting thing about this film is in Italian exploitation films, or indeed Italian cinema at this point generally, the tendency was to take whatever was successful, be it in Italy or in the USA, and to basically rip it off. So you had Dawn of the Dead, which in Italy was called Zombie, and then Lucio Fulci did Zombie Flesh Eaters, which in Italy is called Zombie 2. So it was marketed as a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, which of course it's not. But that's kind of what they did. Interestingly, Bruno Mattei had a film which is called Terminator 2, which was released before the official James Cameron Terminator 2. So they're pretty shameless when it comes to ripping stuff off. And this is no exception. So this is actually a kind of unauthorized, unofficial sort of remake of a film called The Man Called Horse, which has got a very, very similar sort of plot to this, which was a film, I think, from the late 60s or early 70s, where, yeah, again, it's a man, I think he's an Englishman, who kind of gets captured by a tribe and is forced to kind of become one of the tribe and keeps trying to escape and he keeps failing. So it's pretty much the same plot, but that's where this whole cannibal boom comes from. One thing I found very interesting, so as I said, this is by Umberto Lenzi. Now, Umberto Lenzi, one thing he is very, very infamous for in his films, he does like a zoom. There is a lot of zooms in this film. It's constantly, like every 5 minutes, you'll have zoom after zoom after zoom, either a zoom in or a zoom out. Once you've been told that it happens, you honestly not be able to not see it.
I hadn't noticed it. Honestly.
Well, I mean, okay, again, that, because you're not looking for it, you probably won't see it. But if you were to ever watch the film again, or indeed any other Umberto Lenzi film, particularly his Gialli, because it happens a lot in those, you will not unsee it now. Literally every sort of minute or two, it's zoom, 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 zoom.
Okay. I shall look out for that. If I ever watch this film ever again, which is highly unlikely.
Well, so this is very, very different from sort of the last two films that we've discussed.
Again, it's got this terribly British dub over it, which I really enjoy.
Now, this is interesting. I didn't watch it in the English dub. I watched the Italian version with subtitles because that's just my preference. So I'm curious as to what there was on the English dub, because I imagine obviously what the characters were saying is the same as subtitles. I know there's a scene where the main character, John Bradley, him and the chief's daughter, they get pregnant, and he talks about having a little savage.
Yes, yeah. I
a little black savage, I believe, was the exact term that he used.
Yeah, they did do that in the British dub as well, but it's so terribly British, and he's from London, and he tries to explain to her like the difference between where they are, in the jungle and London. And he's like, oh, but you wouldn't be able to understand that, would you?
No, this is not just slightly racist. What the part I found funniest was near the beginning, where he's sort of hasn't been captured yet, where he's talking to his guide and he's talking about, tell me about London. And he talks to him about fog for about 2 minutes, and then the guide falls asleep. But it's like, well, no wonder you're talking to him about fucking fog for like the last 2 minutes. That's all you can discuss about London. Oh, there's great fog.
Yeah. I think that was like a prevalent thing back in the day. It was like London was perceived to have this fog over it all the time.
It's like Gotham.
It's like it would look like smoke to you. And the guy is literally falling asleep.
As anyone would, any sensible person. That first sort of 10 or 15, like that, well, no, not 15 minutes, like 10 minutes of the film is very, very weird, because it starts off at a Thai boxing match. He's with a girl. The girl disappears. We never see the girl again.
Yeah, that was bizarre as well. I
She
didn't
just walks
understand that.
away, and then she's just never seen for the rest of the film. Now, I get that might happen in real life, but he just doesn't seem all that concerned. It's just she just disappears. There's a guy, he gets to a fight, he stabs him with a knife, he runs away. He bribes this guy when he gets his vote, says, I wasn't here, you didn't see me, right? You know, all that. And then, he gets captured wearing his diving suit. So the cannibals, well, they're not really cannibals, they don't really eat people, this friendly tribe that he's in.
Yeah, there's not much cannibalism in this.
No, a low quota of gut munching in this film. But yeah, they think he's a fish man because he's wearing a diving suit. So
God, there's one classic bit, like in the British dub, where he's like, they must think I'm some kind of fish because of my wetsuit. I'm a man, not a fish. And he's shouting it out of the window at them. I'm a man, not a fish. Let me go. It's just hilarious.
Oh, yeah, I think maybe they were trying to go for like a Planet of the Apes type vibe there, but yeah, it just probably come across as hilarious, really, more than anything else.
I know you're saying about the zoom kind of part of this, but did you notice the sort of kaleidoscope effects that they had in the delirious parts where he's trying to remember things?
Yes. Now, there was about a million zooms in those scenes where, like, yeah, for some reason, like, they stuck a load of flashback scenes where he's remembering, like, stabbing the guy and his girl, the white girl that he was with, and then him getting captured. And yeah, they stick, like, sort of, you know, the deep red and yellow and blue lighting in there, and sort of, yeah, kaleidoscope effect, as you say. I mean, that kind of works, I suppose. It's sort of alright for what they were kind of going for. It didn't really bother me that much.
Oh, so cheap and, like, you know, back in the day.
If you're going to do a flashback, do it more professionally, Umberto Lenzi. Come on now.
Yeah, let's not do, like, it's like one of those kaleidoscopes you used to look through as a kid, you know, the toy
Yeah,
one.
no, I get what you mean there, yeah.
But yeah, funny, obviously very innovative for the time. But yeah, the little black savage, he does say on the British dub, he kind of goes, oh, I shall have a son, and he'll be a little black savage. And then they sort of run off to celebrate the pregnancy by having a romp in the flower.
Yeah, that sort of happens a lot in the second half of the film. There is a lot of kind of soft focus romping between the two main characters.
Yeah, there's not much, like, there's no kind of conversation leading up to it. It's just very, very primitive. She's just like, I'm going to lie down here. You're welcome to come over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they just get it on. So it's like, whoa, okay. That's the way this film's going to go then. It probably happens about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it does seem to happen quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of him kind of being the sort of powerful Western male, talking down to her because she's obviously very stupid, and he's going to educate her of the way of the world, which is quite amusing but kind of annoying at the same time.
Right. Bear in mind it was 1972.
Yes, I am bearing that in mind, and it's still annoying. But yeah, no, funny, but yeah, kind of irritating.
The bit I found funny was it was one of the times where the helicopter appears and, like, one of the tribesmen, like, reacts by trying to throw a spear at the helicopter. Yeah. I found that quite amusing. It's just like, come on now. You're not going to hit a helicopter from down there with a spear. You're not, even like the best javelin thrower in the world, like Steve Backley in his prime would not hit this. So come on, you know.
A feeble attempt. Well, the most serious and the funniest part was the bit where she gets ill, and then he's like continuing his sort of belittling of his beautiful, like, tribal wife that he's like won over because there's that magical part where she's allowed to take another man. Because,
this bit, I thought this was so funny.
Yeah, she's allowed to take another man because she's like, her previous guy has like binned her off or something. So
no, I swear he got killed in battle or something. I don't know, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I swear he got killed, so that's why she had to pick like a new husband. Yeah,
and it's like there's like a choice of like the totty of the village, and they've decided that this blonde, because his hair's actually dyed like, you know, fake blonde to make him look more angelic, I think, like, 'cause he's like the sort of pure angelic Westerner in the movie. So he's got this bleached hair. So they've like picked out like a few of the best specimens of the men in the village for her, because she's like the prettiest lady, and they've like queued them up, and it's almost like this weird kind of um peephole thing where they've like got this hole cut through a shed or the hut, and she's inside naked, sat with her back
Of
like
course,
towards the hut. And then they all take turns to go past, and they have to put their hand in. But like obviously non-Western primitive males, they put their hand in the hole and they just want to cop a good feel. So one of them sort of goes directly for her bosoms, and she's like, I'm okay with that, but it's not very romantic, mate. So the second one comes along, and then he
goes
goes
a bit further, doesn't he? Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I'll put up with it, but oh, Jesus Christ, that was even less romantic. And then our Westerner, angelic, sort of blonde-haired guy comes along, and he's a bit more gentlemanly about the whole affair, and he puts his hand in, strokes her arm, and holds her hand, and she's like, oh my God, chivalry's not dead, I'm in love. So she like picks him, and as soon as that happens, she's like, all right then, down to business, runs off across the field, and invites him for a good old romp. So that's how it goes, which is just bizarre.
Yeah. No, I mean, it does kind of sound as if you weren't really very impressed with the film.
It would appear that way. I'm glad that we've watched this film because it is bizarre and funny. But yeah, I did find it a tad on the sexy side. So yeah, the point I was going to make is like the funniest part is when she gets ill and she's pregnant, and you can tell what it's building up to, that she's probably going to die during childbirth. But he's not bothered because he just wants like offspring. He wants a son, and he's like focused on his little black savage that he's going to get. So. She says to him, oh, I feel really terrible, like, I feel really ill. And he's like, oh, don't worry, darling, everything will be fine. And then she goes, oh, I can't see anything anymore. It's all gone black. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. As soon as my son's born, it'll all be fine. He ignores the fact that she's just gone blind because she's not well. And he's like, yeah, not hearing you because, the baby's on the way and that's more important.
Yeah, whatever, love,
After that, he has to explain things that are happening around her and like try to paint this beautiful picture of these butterflies to make her feel better. And then when she's about to give birth, he's like sort of off hunting in the woods. He's not really been told, and he realizes that she's gone into labor, comes to her rescue, and he says, oh, there's another butterfly. And she goes, what color is it? And he says, oh, it's black. And she's like, oh, death, I'm going to die. And he's like, no, everything will be fine.
Nah, it'll be all right, love, trust me.
So, yeah, I mean, I know it's supposed to be primitive and like, backwards and retarded and chauvinistic, but, whew, yeah, it's difficult to watch from that point of view.
Okay, all I'll say...
amusing, though.
All I will say, not... It's kind of in its defence is if you think that's chauvinistic, I didn't really think it was. It didn't cross my mind. Then again, I'm not a woman, so. But if you think that's bad, you should see like Strip Nude for Your Killer or Giallo e Venezia, because yeah, they're proper sexist.
Didn't realise how bothered I was about those themes until we started discussing this, and now I've got a bit of a
bear in mind, like, well, what we're going to watch over the course of this series as well, like, Venting
is good. Venting is good.
Yeah, no, venting is good. Venting is very healthy. I didn't realise this film calls you that much to need to vent, really. But hey, here you go. I like this film more than you did. I thought compared to other cannibal films, the actual cannibals themselves, the main cannibals had more character development than a normal movie of this type.
Wait, what actual scenes of cannibalism did we have? Because there's plenty of rape and animal cruelty in this, but I'm actually struggling to remember which
the
part.
Bad cannibals, they turn up, they kill one of the good cannibals and basically sort of start eating him kind of off camera, and then we come back and they're basically eating him, but that's really it. That's the only scene of like full-on cannibalism in the whole film.
Yeah, it's quite
But yeah,
minimal.
there is animal cruelty. There's a literal cockfight that happens. There's a scene where a monkey gets its head cut off and they eat its brains. There's a fight between a snake and another animal that I can't remember off the top of my head. But again, it was similar
Yeah,
to a cockfight.
quite a lot
A lot
of
of snake death. Snakes, for some reason, seem to get killed a lot in this film.
like snake voodoo blood and black magic, which was quite an interesting theme that I liked. An alligator's beheaded.
Yeah, there's alligator cruelty in this, yeah. I mean, I say overall, it's really weird interesting because it's the same director as Cannibal Ferox, and it is, a cannibal film with the same kind of, kind of similar story, not exactly the same, but it's the same kind of themes. It's quite interesting as to how different this is, because this wasn't written by Lenzi. Lenzi himself wrote Cannibal Ferox, whereas this was written by Francesco Barilli and Massimo Davac. But those two, Barilli directed a film called Perfume of the Lady in Black, which is really good, which I highly recommend. And they also wrote a film called Who Saw Her Die, which is another giallo by Aldolado. And they're sort of very, very well, they're good films. So they had good talent sort of from a screenwriting perspective. So it's quite interesting that, again, like the characters are sort of a bit more developed. I mean, yes, I get what you're saying about the chauvinistic kind of tendencies of the film, but if you take it as like, as a tourist, he kind of gets captured, he tries to escape, he has to learn to kind of become one of the tribe's people, he kind of gets into this sort of very heavy relationship with the daughter, they get pregnant, she dies, and then he just kind of, because these people have basically looked after him, in a way, he kind of feels one of them. He just decides, I'm just going to stay here. I'm one of these people now. This is who I identify myself with. So I thought it was a different story from what you normally get in this kind of film.
Yeah, it was unexpected. Yeah, and like, yeah, that was, it does stand out. But yeah, I'm not sure I could get around that kind of belittling sort of nature of it towards women. But that would be realistic of the tribe. That's what all the males would do in the tribe, even despite him. So,
if anything, I actually found it a bit soppy in places where it was like you had the scenes of the courting and like all the random softcore sex scenes. Like they got a bit much after a while, just because there were so many of them. It's like, yes, I get the point.
that's also true, and it was almost kind of shot in that way as well, where it always looks a bit kind of sunny, if that makes sense, like the colours and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, in terms of the film itself, do you agree that it should have been a video nasty?
Yes. There's rape, and very uncomfortable rape, and the beheading of the alligator. It's interesting that I've never actually seen an actual cockfight in a film, so that was very interesting. So lots of things that did stick in my mind, which did make this something that a horror fan should watch. And another thing, there was plenty of cutting out of tongues, which was quite uncomfortable as well. So I would definitely deem this a video nasty.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I have a friend who really, really hates like any kind of body part removal, particularly like teeth, fingernails and stuff like that, fingers. So yeah, a tongue being cut out is very uncomfortable because we can all kind of relate to that. So
harsh. And the monkey brains, that's pretty harsh. This is like up there with the 6 that we've watched. It's up there with like some of the most gory, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think this is as bad in relative terms. Obviously it's way worse than 99% of films, but in relative terms I don't think it's as gory or as horrible as like Cannibal Ferox, and it's not as deeply emotionally affecting as Cannibal Holocaust. I did like this film more than Mountain of the Cannibal God, just because I found Mountain of the Cannibal God a bit boring for the most part, like we said. So this at least had a story and the characters were at least likable, so it had that going for it. And Lenzi, he does have his own style of filming, and this is a very kind of good example of that.
Yeah, same. It was more comfortable to watch. I definitely preferred this to
Mountain of the Cannibal God.
Cannibal God. And yeah, it definitely was soppy in places, so it was balanced rather than just being just brutality after brutality.
So
So yeah, worth a
yeah,
watch.
although I would say kind of if you are going to watch cannibal films, any of these films, I would say you definitely need to watch Cannibal Holocaust and probably Cannibal Ferox as well. Maybe Cannibal Terror if you want to laugh.
Yeah, I would say that of the six, those are the three that I would recommend the most also.
Okay, right. So we've come to, unbelievably, we've come to the end of our third show, and this is our second Video Nasties show. So they are all the cannibal films on the DPP 72. Now on our next show, we're going to move to something a little bit less sleazy. Only relatively less sleazy though, because we're going to be talking about slasher films. So I'm looking forward very much to that. My name is Greg Knox. You can find me on Facebook under that name. I'm sure there's no one pretending to be me on Facebook, and on Twitter at I am Labyrinth.
And I've been reoffend, and I'm an alternative model and actress, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as ria_offend, and on my public Facebook page as reoffend, that's FEND. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to the slashers, Greg.
Yes, we all love a good slasher film. We will see you next time. Bye, everyone.